Welcome to Fellow Talk. This is a Fellow Futures episode, our series exploring what's next for brands, culture and creativity.
In this episode, we're joined by Lee Ainsworth from Advantage Travel Partnerships to unpack what's changing in the travel landscape and the brands that are shaping it. For the chronically curious, this is Fellow Talk. Lee, thanks so much for joining us. For anyone who doesn't know who you are, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you do in the travel industry.
Yes, well, you've already got my first name. But yeah, I'm Lee Ainsworth, Director of Strategy at the Advantage Travel Partnership. The UK's leading network of travel businesses, representing 750 locations throughout the UK, with representation in 83 countries around the globe. And yeah, representing 17.2 billion of travel spend. So we're very busy. However, what I'm up to at the moment is really focusing on how we navigate a lot of the change that we're seeing in the kind of macro environment and helping our member businesses to see themselves through it with the right support and our leading single stop solution. So yeah, a really interesting time at the moment to be in travel.
Brilliant, thanks Lee. And yeah, wonderful introduction to what you're doing. And I guess kind of just following on from that, I'd love to know what's been catching your eye lately in the industry. Is there anything that you think is a bit of a sign for what's coming up next? Any sort of experience, information? I guess what's caught your eye?
Well, I think I've got to start first with what's really standing out to us at the moment, which is about the resilience and adaptability that we're seeing from independent travel businesses. I know that, as I alluded to in the opener, there's a lot of change that's taken place in our everyday lives, but in business as well. And that adaptability and resilience is really coming through loud and clear, particularly when I think about the disruption of tech and how that changes consumer behaviour, and how we're supporting our members to navigate that challenge. I think that that's only going to deepen. So hence our role in trying to support our members through that is even more critical. They are by far, from an independent travel agent's perspective, the ones who are able to deliver that personalised, trusted advice, which is critical, especially when you think about an age of misinformation with, as we mentioned before, the rise of tech. How far do you trust it when expert advice over something like travel is so paramount and critical?
And I guess just on that sort of note of resilience, how was it sort of before? Like, obviously that feels like what's catching now. Was there a turning point? Was there a point where you thought, wow, resilience has really become a lot more important? Was there a noticeable change, or do you think it's been a bit more gradual?
I think what we've seen, or at least from my perspective, what I've seen is the maturity of businesses. We're looking at businesses not so much as a lifestyle anymore in travel, but certainly more as a long-term sustainable business that people are investing in it and viewing through that lens, which is a different place to if you think back to the kind of 90s and 2000s, where actually travel was a bit more easygoing. However, since that time, you've only got to look at the number of difficulties and challenges that the industry has had to face, from 9/11, ash cloud, financial crisis, right the way through to COVID. So I think that resilience has just become a lot more structured now in terms of how businesses get themselves back on track, ready to serve customers. And that's kind of the key difference that I've noticed from the personal angle.
In terms of the industry as a whole, Lee, because obviously you've been in travel for quite a while now in terms of your overall experience, but like, what would you say is the most kind of excited elements of the industry at the moment that kind of grabs your attention? And for instance, what are the most cautious ones that you are kind of hearing about as well?
I think the biggest one, it would be remiss of me not to say that was technology, the advent of AI and how that's going to transform how we operate as individuals, how businesses operate. It's the one that poses probably the most concern, but also the greatest amount of opportunity.
Yeah.
So I would definitely say technology and how we harness it in order to make sure that it becomes an extension of personal service that we've known travel agents to have for a long time. I think outside of that, though, and looking beyond technology, the rise of new destinations, and I know that some of this was alluded to in your trends report as well, or the futures report, is about what people are looking at from an experiences point of view and how that's going to reshape the destinations that people want to travel to. And that's a really exciting part.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear, because I think also like when you're looking at the travel industry as a whole, right? Like it's actually quite a personable industry. Like it's very human to human in terms of that overall aspect. So when you're talking about tech as being a cautious area of interest, do you find that there's kind of hesitation with that in terms of the kind of people that you talk to on a day to day?
Yep. So overall, I do see it as an extension of individuals. There is a way to harness it in order to channel the expert advice and that personal kind of relationship directly with consumers. And if I just think back to what we went through from the whole .com boom perspective, 30 years ago, we were all trying to figure out how that was going to feed in and become part of our lives. And I think we're grappling with that from a personal perspective today, and also businesses are looking at it in the same way. So they're trying to figure out how do they take this measured step-by-step approach to integrating AI into their business to become an extension of what they offer from a customer service point of view. So that would be where I would say that we are, and that our support, particularly from my perspective, in helping our members in particular to navigate that and start integrating it into their everyday business operations is key to making it a success.
Yeah, because just I guess on that note of change and speed, typically, you know, as you've pointed out, and I think every industry is grappling with this, AI is the kind of technology that is changing things at a pace that feels unfathomable. How have you felt travel has in general responded to those kind of shifts in technology? Obviously, you mentioned the .com bubble, but yeah, you know, some industries really struggle with fast adaptability. Do you think that's the case with the travel sector?
I mean, overall, travel has faced so many challenges. We are in a globally interconnected world, so every day there are challenges that come at travel businesses. And I think AI is obviously one of the biggest hidden agenda points when it comes to the travel space at the moment. I think for me, there are two parts to it really. There's the confidence to invest from a business point of view in investing in the right tools as well that are going to support what your business strategy is. And then there's also the consumer element as well, that by bringing in AI, at what point can we say that we fully trust it, and at what or what type of role does AI play within a travel business? So if I think about what our members will be focused on, it'll be about how it can bring around operational efficiencies within a business to allow them to grow and scale. It'll be looking at how it can support them during the whole itinerary search period. How it can handle simple requests that don't require navigation of complex information. So when I think about regulations, I know it's very boring, but think about regulations, think about the advice that the government issues on destinations that we travel to. There is an argument that AI at some point can play a role in that, but how at the minute it navigates and looks at that information, I think is a part that, are we really that comfortable with putting that in front of a consumer and allowing a consumer to make kind of data-driven decision makings based on its interpretation of the world? I think that that's the part where we've got to be really careful. And we know travel agents in particular have that information. They know how to interpret it. They've worked with it for so long. They can give the consumer confidence and really help them to navigate that complex environment and discussion that goes on when you're looking to book a holiday. So in answer to your actual question, I think it's twofold. I think travel will be slightly behind the curve on it because of the level of intricacies that we're working on, but it's absolutely top of the conversation and something that we know that businesses want to invest in, and we will adapt to it and we will help it to power forward our businesses.
Definitely. I think it just even feels like travel has changed so much in the last 5 years, obviously with the pandemic, perhaps even more so than over the last 20 years. But I guess for you, what do you think is the biggest shift in what people want out of travel these days?
I think the biggest thing is that people want to go beyond an escape. They want to get into how travel enriches their lives. Travelers want experiences that represent their values, their identity, their lifestyle. It continues to be prioritized by consumers, even given the cost of living pressures that we see in the background. We know that independent agents are quickly evolving to the requirements from a client's perspective, and understand really the nuances as well, because hyper-personalization is certainly becoming a thing. And who's better placed than a human who understands those connections and can help a consumer navigate it?
In terms of experiences as a whole, like there's people that, like, for instance, love adventure. There's people that want to go on beach holidays, for instance. Do you see there being kind of generational differences in terms of what, when we're talking about experiences, which kind of generation goes towards something that might be considered like your package holiday approach versus something which is more adventure based, depending on how old they are, for instance?
Yeah, I think, look, we see shifts that happen in that space all the time. So I think typically bucket list voyages would have been, or voyages or travel, whichever, would have been kind of something that 60-year-olds and over would have typically once prioritized. Actually, what we're seeing now is 24 to 35-year-olds that are prioritizing that kind of travel, that once in a lifetime experience that would have been a bucket list. People are no longer waiting for it. I think when we see the shifts that are then happening more broadly, particularly around cruise and the average age for cruise coming down, that's really encouraging as well, that we've got people who are willing to go out there and try different types of travel at a much younger age, and that are prioritising spend in order to be able to do so.
No, great stuff.
Yeah, I know even personally for us, there's been chats of like a cruise. Is that like everyone
It's on the list somewhere.
Is everyone okay with the cruise? And it's not been objected to that much.
No, it's well, there was one that I saw which is kind of, I would say, against your conventional kind of cruise approach, but it was a festival on a cruise ship. So you'd start in like, I think it was Miami or Florida. You go around the Caribbean, and there's like 30, 40 bands that are on the cruise ship. They do a festival, and then you go back to Miami. So basically, it's a festival on a boat. You've got your dorm, your cabin, I should say. Everything's included, and it's kind of like somewhat of a one-stop shop, which obviously from a younger generation point of view as well, like you're getting people interested in that kind of approach to travel experiences, which otherwise may be kind of giving it the cold shoulder or something that they may have not entertained. So I think there's definite movement in lots of different types of travel now, like you're saying, Lee, in terms of like where those interests are. People are willing to give it a little bit more of a shot, try something new. If they don't like it, move on. But there's definitely that more kind of flexibility, I think, more so than ever.
Yeah. And brands are really up in their game as well. So if you think about new entrants, particularly into that cruise space that you're talking about just there as well, if you think Virgin Voyages didn't exist 5 years ago. So Virgin Voyages now directly caters to that younger demographic. And personally, I have been privileged enough to experience Virgin Voyages. It's an amazing product. So as long as brands are investing in it, it's going to continue to rise, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so shout out to Virgin Voyages for the pop. If anyone wants to send a sponsorship away, no, just joking. I think, like you say, that I think we're seeing that even across just brands in general in most sectors and markets. Is, technology has no longer become the moat that it was of competition. Experience, that kind of dealing with the human, is really key. And actually, kind of, I know there's even been some talks in the branding space that even that, controversially, that branding is dead due to the idea that really it should be investing in the product and the experience. Me and you have always argued that is the brand. That's kind of just more of a product angle of the brand and what it expresses. But yeah, I think that's really key now for everyone, is just focusing on the human, on the experience, and just what the value you're really bringing to people's lives. It's so precious now. I guess as well, just sort of going along that lines of how people are traveling, we're seeing the kind of lines blur nowadays a lot more between sort of business and leisure when it comes to travel. I guess along that kind of side, what do you think, where people are making travel part of their lives, how do you see that shift sort of playing out?
I mean, it's a shift that we've seen in travel for a long time, particularly coming out of COVID as well, where the lines were very blurred on what was leisure, what was kind of business trips. And actually, I think it kind of boils down to four key facts that are going to drive it. So there's the demographics, individual preference, the policy and duty of care from a travel management perspective, and also the value for money and cost effectiveness. So kind of 4 elements that are at play there. And what I mean by when we touch on the demographic side is that Gen Z are prioritising the ability to step into roles. They will represent 30% of business travellers by 2030. And they are prioritising the ability to have more flexible work trips where leisure is baked into it. It's not really an option in their eyes. They're going to drive and push for it. On individual preference, shaping decisions based on kind of that personal preference. Where will you want to continue to travel for extended periods and wrap around a trip? I think when we look at short haul, and by that I mean from the UK and into the Med, then from that angle, actually it's less likely to do an extended stay. But if you're traveling intercontinental and if you're thinking about North America, South America, then of course you're going to want to stay on. However, I do think that also we have to temper it a little bit because there is the flip side of it. How do you start managing from a corporate's perspective policies around what is allowed from a corporate travel point of view? Who is responsible for duty of care when somebody does a wraparound on a work trip? So all of that needs to be navigated. It's not going to put people off, but it's something that will become increasingly important that is covered off. As for the trend overall, though, I certainly think it'll continue, that's for sure.
Yeah, I definitely remember we were on one surf trip. And do you remember that guy that was, he was really pushing for his role to be completely remote so that he could literally surf in
the mornings and then work in the afternoons.
Yeah, which did seem like a dream.
Seemed ideal.
Yeah, I was really into that. I don't know why. That was quite early on in, when was that? That was 21, wasn't it? So it was quite early on in the
just
remote
after
working.
COVID,
Yeah, that was quite early in the remote discussion. So I don't know if that poor fella ever got that to be his lifestyle, but I guess nowadays that could be more. And I think you raise a really good point there, Lee, around sort of the kind of circumnavigating it. Like, I think the conversation of remote work's been going on for ages. Obviously, businesses are adapting and growing and to that ever sort of changing request and need from the workforce and kind of balancing out. But I think you raise a good point around like duty of care and perhaps some of those more like regulatory, not to get this into a conversation about regulations, but I do quite enjoy. But I think it's true, like there is on the positive side, if we're looking at companies enabling this for their workforce, it is more some of those things like duty of care, safety. In terms of, I guess, the travel industry, how do you think they've been sort of responding to that? I mean, have you found even in travel that actually people are more open to that kind of blending of business and leisure with travel, or has it always sort of been like that anyway? And you guys are actually just the front runners of what everyone's requesting.
Well, we are pioneers in many ways. Yeah, so overall, I do think that travel's been pioneering the way for a long time. I think it's ingrained within our businesses. And look, we understand that space and understand how to navigate the complexity of regulation, of duty of care. So if we can't do it and lead from the front, then, says a lot really. So we have been leading the way. I know that personally. I've often, and 9 times out of 10, will extend my travel in order to explore a new destination out the back of a conference.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, why not? It's a great way to explore the world and combine 2 passions that you have, working and travel and actually traveling. I do think that to your point around how companies need to adapt and ensure that they're on the right side of regulation and policy, that this also adds a massive benefit from that employee value too. So if you think about work-life balance and provided that you're prepared, that you've done the right risk assessments, that you're happy for your employees to do that wraparound, what a great selling point that you've got as a business. So I think it can help you stand out in what's already a difficult kind of jobs market out there anyway. And that overall, it can really support kind of longevity of careers, people staying with you, and help you to uphold that whole work-life balance. But again, coming back to thinking about corporates who are wanting to do that, or any business out there, kind of the key role that a corporate travel management company or a travel agent is able to bring, because we've dealt with it. We know how to help people navigate the complexity of it.
So Lee, you've kind of touched around like flexibility in terms of obviously like people going away for work, in terms of whether it's to Europe or elsewhere, and how people are extending their stays. But in terms of like that work lifestyle relationship, obviously there's an endangerment there potentially of blurring lines between what is work and what is like personal time. Are we at risk of potentially like never switching off because of this kind of potential blurred line scenario that we're potentially coming in contact with?
Yes. So I do think that there are two parts in answer to that. So A, from the policy and leadership kind of behaviours and how that shapes culture within a business is really important, because it helps to demonstrate what the norm is when people are travelling, and where you can draw the line, between your own personal time and between what you're doing from the work travel perspective. There's also the other part as well, that given what we've gone through in the past 5 years, that cultural shift that we've all gone through as individuals coming out of the pandemic, has also helped us to reassess and reevaluate where our priorities are, what it is that we value the most, which is that work-life balance. So yes, there's some wraparound kind of policies that need to go into place, but also we've evolved.
Yeah.
I would like to think that long gone is that guilt of having to have presenteeism from 9 a.m. on the dot. You're dead not to be there at 9:01 up until 5:30. It's now part of this blended life. And I think that there is a major benefit to that people can pick and choose. When do they operate best? When do they work best? How do people want to contribute from a work perspective? And when is it that they want to take that step back? And there's a lot more control now from an individual perspective. And ultimately, if I think about from a company angle, certainly something that we champion at Advantage Travel Partnership is the ability to work when it suits you, and as long as the output is there, and as long as a business is focused on output and outcomes, you don't have to concern yourself with when are people doing this work. As long as actually you're seeing the results at the end of it, that should be the priority, which should help support that whole work-life balance when traveling.
Also, another thing that we spoke about in the report is how sort of wellness travel has got much deeper recently. People chasing control, recovery, longevity. What do you think's driving that what's driving that appetite in your view?
I think, again, there are a couple of different parts to that. I think when it comes to control around self-optimization, then people are looking to use that precious time away in order to focus on themselves, because quite frankly, why shouldn't they be doing that? They don't have to spread themselves thin, and nor does that mean having to go and fly and flop, as we would like to have called it, on a beach for 14 nights. Actually, there are ways in which you can invest your time and energy into giving something back to yourself as an individual. I think that there's also the drive from people who are hungry for that deeper experience, because they're looking for self-discovery. I think after a long time, over the past 5 years, of being stuck at home with your own thoughts, it's not a bad way to channel it. And, I've also got people within our membership that operate now wellness businesses that focus on that inner element of finding peace and calm, and what better way to do it than when you're connecting to cultures and helping people to go on this self-discovery journey, which ultimately is the epitome of the trend, right?
I think I've been flying and flopping for years by the sounds of it. But it's true, because I must admit, even I've been thinking about this as I get older. I do, start to question what I do with my leisure time. And like you say, on holiday, trying to have a genuine experience, because I think there's been a kind of pushback against experiences that are too curated. I think we've sort of talked about this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lee, but culturally there was a bit of a faux pas against package holidays. Definitely when I was younger, it was seen as too controlled, no fun, because it was just sitting and doing the same thing. But actually, over the recent years, package holidays have had a rise in popularity, thanks to obviously things like controlled costs, and like I say, personal anecdotally, gosh, it's looking more and more appealing the older I get, and the more sort of responsibilities I have to navigate. And especially if there's more people, the idea of just saying to people, it's this price and that's it, is, compared to even when me and you used to do Airbnbs, everything all personal, it's it's actually quite hard to cost that, which was fine when you were young, because we were just living off of beans and beer. But I think definitely I've even felt and seen that sort of shift culturally when it comes to genuine experiences. I guess how do you think brands can actually go about making experiences that are genuinely restorative rather than just kind of like sort of wellness checklists?
I think overall, from a brand's perspective, they've got to lead with authenticity and start with that angle first off. That everything has to become about value and not about price. Is kind of the leading way to start, of course. I think when it comes to that authenticity, it then has to be clear and spread straight throughout the entire production itinerary. And we work with some incredible partners that are all about taking you out into local communities, giving you that deep dive experience, connecting you with local individuals. And they're the ones who are doing really well. It's where we're seeing a rise in terms of bookings and consumers wanting that type of travel. I think from that brand's point of view, getting under the skin, personalization is kind of key to it, because without that deep understanding of who your customer actually is, how are you ever going to know how to gain that authentic experience and drive the kind of product innovation that we need to see? So that overall would be where I think brands needed to start, deep personalization.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess on that sort of note, how do you think brands could go about, happy for you to answer purely in a travel's perspective, but about, I guess, capturing that without sounding too data miney overlordy, but how have you found the travel industry has gone about getting the right information for that personalization? Because it's a very complex product, like what a lot of travel companies are offering, and like you say, to go even further in personalization seems incredible. Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you go about sort of getting that information or just getting that understanding.
Well, I guess that there's two angles to this. So there is the pre-packaged version of it, which is where there are itineraries that are kind of produced in order to bring in different aspects of cultural experiences, and then packaged together in order to demonstrate what is possible. Because, of course, sometimes the imagination isn't always there to figure out what it is that you actually want. So we've got that kind of outward-facing version, which is the proactive sell. And then thinking about it from our travel agents' perspective, they know their local community, they know the individuals, so it goes well beyond kind of data mining. Of course, they have to have a rough understanding of who that customer is in the first place. But once you sit down and start having the conversation, there are very simple kind of mind mapping methods that you can go through in order to figure out what's most important. I mean, Laura and yours travel agents have been doing it for years. I mean, literally back as far as 1847 for the original Thomas Cook. So nearly 200 years that travel agents have been figuring out what it is that a customer really wants. Going through that route can then help you to identify, right, what's going to make up the perfect itinerary. And the beauty of it is that travel agents can then go and approach it with a basket approach of pulling in these different items that are going to suit what the customer wants based on that conversation. Quite honestly, I think you'd have to put a lot of prompts into ChatGPT in order to get something like that out of it, which is where, of course, our members shine in particular.
And I think even just on that sort of note of personalization, pop culture is being an even bigger driver nowadays when it comes to what people want to go out and see. Still hoping to go to New Zealand purely for Lord of the Rings at the moment.
Oh, me too.
It's everywhere at the moment, right?
I mean, I the amount of location. I mean, I'm guilty of definitely going to places and looking for pop cultural kind of references. I guess, how do you see storytelling like that shaping sort of travel and sort of what people are looking for from experiences? You've obviously spoken about personalization, but I guess I'm talking here is that cultural broader storytelling, the impact that has on sort of travel.
Well, I mean, overall, people are inspired by stories. You're absolutely right. So we're in agreement on that front. I think the whole pop culture impact on where people travel to has actually been a long established trend within the industry. It often is that key deciding factor. And I'm right there with you, by the way, for Lord of the Rings. I would love to go to New Zealand and visit Hobbiton. Other programs such as Emily in Paris, Jane MacDonald, who brought crews to life and into the nation's kind of living rooms, has done for crews massive deals when it comes to being there in the consciousness of the minds of travellers. So I guess overall, the story and the picture that we're painting here through, regardless of whether that's something like Emily in Paris, Jane MacDonald, and what she's done for Cruise, is that ultimately we're going beyond a place from a travel agent's perspective of just attractions. It's turning this into an immersive experience. So to the point there around Lord of the Rings, it's not just a case of going to Hobbiton, taking the pictures, saying that you've been there. Actually, it's how do you weave that throughout the entire itinerary, whether that be through some kind of food tasting or, I don't know, some experimental kind of drinks part of the itinerary that you create in. My mind keeps going blank on that one, but that's okay. So yeah, it's how do you turn the entire journey into that immersive experience beyond just calling into a place to see an attraction, which does remind me of Game of Thrones and the Diocletian Palace in Split, which I've been lucky enough to travel to, and actually it was on an extended conference.
Oh, there you go.
You know, tying two together here. And yeah, being there at the Diocletian Palace, whilst that wasn't, you know, the whole purpose of it, actually it added something completely different. And something that whilst I didn't understand at the time because I'd not actually watched Game of Thrones, I now have and can say that I've sat on the throne as well. So yeah, great story to tell. And it's about that narrative that we're bringing back into travel agencies to help people create that immersive experience.
And I think just on that note as well, Lee, like obviously we're talking quite a lot about like immersion, this like wider storytelling for why people may want to go to certain destinations. What opportunities do you think that kind of opens up for these destinations? Like whether that's with like specific tourism boards or people that can kind of drive more kind of footfall to these areas that may not have thought about kind of visiting before.
I mean, it's a massive opportunity from a tourist board perspective. It's a huge opportunity from destinations and from the consumer point of view. I think as long as we do it in a sustainable way, because reality is that a lot of these places that have featured from a film perspective don't really have the infrastructure to support it.
Yeah.
So as long as we do that in a sustainable way, it really is kind of a no-brainer, right? In order to try and drive more people into destinations to see a different side of a destination than what they would have seen before, and certainly adds millions of pounds into the local economy, which is definitely great from a sustainability point of view.
So just on terms of sustainability, Lenny, like obviously with people flying, taking cruises, there's a certain kind of green approach that some people are kind of aware of, or at least they like to be aware of it. And there's still very much a say-do gap in terms of whether people will actually act on that in terms of their overall level of care around sustainability. Why do you think that is when it comes to sustainability in travel?
I can only really speak from a personal perspective on this. And I think what I've observed is that the gap really comes down to cost and what that looks like, and also where the information is available from. So one of the things that I always admire about from a corporate traveller perspective is that actually carbon footprint, sustainability is ingrained within how that type of travel is actually booked. In the kind of leisure market, it's not so much.
Okay.
So I think it requires a lot more calculation when you're thinking about the full range of services that have been included. And therefore, actually, I'm not sure that it makes it as accessible as it would be from that corporate travel side. So I think, yeah, two parts that are causing that gap. There is A, the accessibility to that level of information, but B, also that cost pressure, which I do suspect plays a part and a role in the choices that consumers make.
And regarding those two kind of areas around accessibility and cost, like what would you feel would make it more sustainable as more of a default for people going forward rather than, shall we say, something that could be seen as more of a niche?
I think what we've really got to do is demonstrate the local impact. So, you know, you look at some of the touring and adventure companies that are out there that really put a lot back into the communities that they operate within. I am going to mention it. G Adventures do an absolute load of great work in terms of feeding back into the community. I think it's about demonstrating more of that and the impact that you can have by visiting these destinations, because travel is a force for good. Let's never forget that. It is a force for good. And I think the demonstration of that, which is what we see through the touring angle, if we can bring that into the mainstream and demonstrate how even by choosing a self-cater and a half-board option and going and spending money in a local destination can help pipe money literally back into the local economy. I think that all of that will help, and it will help us to shift the narrative when we demonstrate that further. And that's really, I mean, we've got to remember from the start of the package holiday, just over 50 years ago, when it, became mainly accessible to everyone, we've gone down the route of all-inclusive because we wanted this all-inclusive package holiday where you didn't have to spend anything in resort. And that takes a lot to shift. And some people, and this isn't a bad thing because all-inclusives have their place, some people at the moment probably aren't in the financial position either to do anything other, because at least that way, with the cost of living crisis looming in the background, they're able to budget for the entire holiday that they're travelling on. So there's nothing bad about that in the slightest. But there are ways which we can bring to the fore the really good contribution that travellers can have by choosing different types of board bases, by going out and spending in the local economy of destinations. Bringing that to the forefront, I think, can help people to shape sustainable travel choices.
In our report, we talk a lot about sensory homecoming, so people craving real, tangible experiences in an increasingly digital, saturated world. How are you seeing that turn up in travel?
Well, first off, I found the insights that were in the report quite sobering because, from my perspective, I actually have a mum who loves to, whenever we go on holiday, go out there and she wants to tick everything off on a bucket list. So she wants to take a picture of her with the Statue of Liberty, of her with kind of One World Trade Center, etc. And I'm just thinking about New York, one of the recent holidays. And that always drives me personally mad. I love to just try and get on the subway somewhere, and I'm just thinking about New York example again, and just go with the flow and find out where I'm trying to get to just by trial and error. Rather than having this whole pre-planned itinerary from start to finish of, right, at 11 a.m. we're going to be here and we're going to take this picture in order to tick it off because, to our conversation much earlier, we've seen it on Instagram, so now that's it. We've got to go and tick off the picture that we've already seen when we were doing our research on Instagram, and having that more kind of self-guided tour, for want of better words, because ultimately you're going through that whole trial and error in a destination, I think shows up every day. It's down to personal preference. I don't think that there is a prescribed way in which we're seeing it come through in travel. But certainly when you think about the mindfulness of people wanting to escape from their phones, it's only natural that it's going to happen. And there is a joy in it as well, of just discovering a destination by going on a walk or, just getting on the subway and finding your own way there, being able to remember, the signs that you took along the way, the different smells of the destination, just being truly immersed in the moment and not thinking about, I could probably get there 15 minutes faster if I'd gone onto Google Maps and had a look, but,
no stories though that way, is there, realistically?
Yeah, I personally quite enjoy trying to avoid Google Maps for as long as possible, but I don't know if that's my sort of secret want to be a black cab driver and just have the knowledge and just be like, oh, it's round there. I don't know why I enjoy being asked for directions so much. Public announcement, please no one come up to me and just expect directions from everywhere. I'm not that big of a fan of it. But
I think I was a Holman pigeon in a previous life, because somehow I can just manage to set out on a course and just head in that direction. It tends to work out all right.
Always the best. Another thing we touch on the report is this idea that culture is being a way that people are starting to express their identity. So, what the trip says about them is just as important about what they do. Do you think that that's maybe sort of shifting, this idea of sort of cultural portfolios, that people are trying to express themselves through their experiences that they demonstrate or that they just experience themselves? How do you see that sort of turning up in travel as well? Do you think that's changing what travellers value in what they seek in their experiences today?
100%. And the reason why I was kind of thinking about that there for just a moment is that I think I've gone through a very similar phase where actually, for me, long haul travel was something that I invested all of my energy into. I wanted to travel in New York, not just because it was, great for Instagram, but it did look good on Instagram as well. I wanted to go to Mauritius, that I could see the complete opposite of what New York looked like. And therefore, I would have this completely different perspective. The Middle East, exactly the same. My travels to Thailand, exactly the same. So there was this rationale and reasoning behind each of those decisions, is that I wanted it to feel completely different and to look very different as well in terms of the aesthetic, the style, and what you get out of those experiences. So from that angle, I can see that it already plays a part, and it's played a part for me.
So as well in the report, we talk about sustainability, which feels more now like smart business rather than just ethics when it comes to how people are traveling and what they're pushing. How are you seeing brands make this transition in real terms? What are people doing? What are the kind of small actions they can do to actually make change when it comes to sustainability?
I mean, I think that this is a difficult part of the conversation. It's not an easy conversation to have. Ultimately, I believe that travel is a force for good. We are connecting and educating consumers on different cultures, different perspectives from across the globe. When it comes down to sustainability itself, it's not clean cut, it's not black and white. I think our role, more than anything, is to empower the education of consumers through providing them with choice, helping them to make their own informed decisions, and really delivering our value from a travel agents, travel management companies' perspective as to what the options entail from that sustainability point of view, and let the end consumer make those choices. Of course, there are still overarching kind of more macro changes that we have already seen investment in travel. When I think about sustainable aviation fuel, when I think about the improvements that have been made from a cruise liner's perspective in reducing their carbon impact, investing in technology that gets them closer to that point of carbon neutral. So we know that there are these larger investments that are taking place, but ultimately from a consumer's point of view, about giving them the right information so that they can make that informed decision and choice based on their own personal circumstance.
And I guess just building upon that as a whole, like we talk quite a lot about like culture, we're talking quite a lot about like sensory homecomings and obviously sustainability. Like out of those, which kind of excites you the most in terms of the travel space?
So I think there's two things that excite me about the future. There is the cultural portfolio aspect of the Futures Report. And then there's also something I want to lean into about tech and AI. But sticking with cultural portfolio to start with, I think the thing that excites me most in that area is that it's that true portrayal of who we are, who we want to be perceived as. Ultimately, self-expression is more than just kind of the brands and clothes that we wear, and that it becomes that self-portrayal. And I think that that's going to be a really interesting trend to see carry into the future, particularly as people use it as an opportunity to travel further, travel more, which is always great from a business point of view, but also how it starts to help us generate kind of inspirational content for others as well, how it starts to broaden our own mindsets, how it plays a role in education far beyond just what we typically currently see as, the travel space. How does that start to become in its own right pop culture? As a consequence of what people are curating and how they're curating it. So that's a really interesting trend for the future that is really exciting. The other part, though, is on technology and what happens there from the tech perspective. So thinking about, and I know that we've talked at length about how technology is already disrupting the landscape, how it's empowering consumers, how we're looking to use it in order to empower consumers through the travel space as well, not just on a direct basis, but how we use it going forward in order to make sure that it becomes an extension of an individual, that it helps travel agents, when I think about our members, to help answer some of the easier to answer questions, and that it reserves their knowledge for when having direct conversations with consumers, how they're going to still be the backbone that provides that insight, knowledge, support when things go wrong, which is something that AI certainly can't do at the moment, nor would I be going under a chatbot in the event of what we've seen with the recent hurricane in Jamaica. That requires a human at the other end that can display empathy in a way that AI can't. So how do we make sure that we capitalize on all the strengths of AI to make better, more robust, sustainable businesses, really support the consumer experience, knowing that in the background, we've always got their back. So that in itself is something that I'm really interested to see as it expands and as we move forward, particularly how we can support travel businesses with that, thinking about the types of tools and services that we provide. So yeah, really helping to empower travel businesses to thrive in a world that is supported by tech, not overridden by it.
And I guess obviously we've spoken about what excites yourself, Lee, but like, what is it that potentially could worry you at this point in time? Like, what do you think brands aren't ready for yet in terms of what we're speaking about?
AI. No, but genuinely, like, it is that two-pronged approach. And I know that we talked about it earlier on. There's a lot to be excited about it, but there's also a lot to be concerned about. However, I think putting, the AI topic of conversation at one side, we're in a world that is moving so quickly now. And when we think about geopolitics, that we're not going to get into the detail of, but when we think about the impact and the potential impacts on confidence that has from a business's perspective, how that shows up then in a consumer's decisions and choices that they make, that's really quite troubling, because to the point of something that was mentioned in the Futures report, we talked about this state of permacrisis, and we are quite literally in a state of permacrisis. So we're not actually recovering from it, moving on and drawing a line under it. We're just dealing in this space where, from a consumer perspective, and even me thinking about myself as a consumer, we're dealing with fighting fires, wondering where the next challenge is going to come from, rather than being able to plan for the future and having this sense of calm in our lives. So hence, I think it also drives an opportunity for travel too, because that is something that, actively helps us to calm down, prevent burnout. So yeah, bit of a two-pronged approach on that one.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a kind of like, when are we going to stop looking for the next fire and just assume that the fires might actually stop? But
that's true.
I think that's something everyone can relate to, is the sort of current climate around, as we say, like how people are feeling and what's really stressing them. And as you mentioned, travel is such a wonderful way of kind of escaping that, or kind of dealing with it, whether it is through like the wellness travel ideas, but being proactive in the management of that kind of those more negative feelings. I guess if we sort of took that idea, if you could redesign the travel experience for the next decade, where would you start?
I think it has to start from the ground up, in terms of how we inspire people to make the travel choices that they then go on to make/take. And by that, what I mean is really demonstrating authenticity through our marketing, authenticity from the destinations that we send people to. How do we really lead and turn value add into the key USP in travel, so that we stop and get ourselves away from the price? Because price, as people have shown, 1 in 4 prioritize in the latest KPMG stats that I read, 1 in 4 people are prioritizing travel spend by reducing actively their spend on things like takeaways, etc. So how are we going to make sure that we show up for a consumer in order to deliver greater value, and value add becomes the norm, and that price is no longer the thing that we use to market the kind of pilot high, sell it cheap mentality. But we literally cater to that hyper personalization by delivering increased value. That will be where I would start, which has probably covered a lot of ground there. But anyway, I've gone for it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And probably on that note then, would you say that that's what this is perhaps not such an open-ended question, but would you say that that's what you hope people value most in the future of travel?
100%. I hope that people value the access to subject matter experts that have their back, that have their corner, that are making and offering them options that reflect deeply what their own personal requirements are. I really hope that that is what the future looks like. I think about our membership and the great job that they're doing in terms of reacting to the market, having their customers back, guiding them through this really complex landscape. I'm hoping that that continues, even with the advent of technology, which should make our lives easier. That is the single biggest thing that I want people to value most.
Nice. Well, Lee, thanks so much for coming on the episode today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been lovely talking to you. And yeah, thanks for all the insights.
You too. Thank you so much.
That's it for this episode of Fellow Futures. You can explore more of the insights in our new report, Transforming Travel Brands for Tomorrow's Travellers, over at fellowstudio.com.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Fellow Talk.